November 1966, in a remote corner of West Virginia, the darkness took shape. A massive entity, over 7 feet tall, with wings like a demon and eyes that burned like hellfire, revealed itself. They called it the Mothman. For the next 13 months, it didn't just spread terror. It gnawed at the sanity of an entire town, dragging them toward a fated tragedy that no one could prevent. It began as a living nightmare, for terrified witnesses reported a giant, winged creature of indeterminate shape standing in the shadows. When they fled, it took flight, not just keeping pace, but soaring above their speeding car, its horrific wing flaps audible over the engine's roar. Their screams were the first testimony, but that was only the prelude to a 13-month campaign of terror. Soon, hundreds of residents had seen it, but they weren't the ones seen. They were the ones being seen. The night was pitch black, save for the twin beams of headlights cutting through the fog. 2 young couples, out for an evening drive near the abandoned TNT area, found themselves plunged into a waking nightmare. As they rounded a bend, their headlights illuminated a sight that defied explanation. A towering figure, its eyes glowing an unearthly red, standing motionless in the road. Panic gripped them as they swerved, tires screeching against the asphalt. But their terror was just beginning. The creature unfurled massive wings and took to the air, keeping pace with their speeding vehicle. Its wing beats thundered above them, drowning out their screams and the roar of the engine. No matter how fast they drove, those burning red eyes remained fixed on them, peering through the windows, always just out of reach. When they finally reached the safety of town, their story poured out in a frantic jumble. But it wasn't long before others came forward with their own encounters. Sketches began to circulate, each more nightmarish than the last. A face without features, save for those hypnotic red eyes. Wings that seemed to span impossible lengths. A body that shifted between solid mass and shadow. The next 13 months were an exercise in psychological torture. Mothman wasn't just a physical monster. It was a haunting presence. It appeared everywhere, its glowing red eyes a beacon of fear. Televisions and radios erupted in static whenever it was near. Phone calls were cut short by strange electronic screeches. And then the mysterious men in black arrived, cold figures in black cars, warning witnesses to stay silent. It seemed Mothman wasn't the only thing watching Point Pleasant. Sightings multiplied at an alarming rate. Residents reported seeing the creature perched on rooftops, its massive form silhouetted against the night sky. Others swore they saw it gliding past their windows, those red eyes peering into their homes. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp around its presence. Electronic devices became unreliable harbingers of its approach. Television screens would suddenly fill with snow, the image distorting into unrecognizable shapes before cutting to black. Radios would pick up nothing but an eerie, pulsing static, occasionally broken by what sounded like distant, inhuman whispers. Some claimed to hear a deep, thrumming sound that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. As if the Mothman wasn't enough, the arrival of the men in black pushed the town further into paranoia. These figures appeared without warning, always clad in impeccable black suits that seemed out of place in the rural setting. Their skin was described as unnaturally pale, their movements stiff and robotic. They would question witnesses, their voices devoid of emotion, warning them in no uncertain terms to keep quiet about what they had seen. The pressure on the town became unbearable. Then, on December 15th, 1967, the breaking point finally came. During rush hour traffic, a single horrifying metallic screech tore through the sky. The Silver Bridge, a symbol of the town's pride, buckled and collapsed in less than a minute. Dozens of cars were plunged into the freezing Ohio River below. 46 people died, suffocating in the icy water, trapped in a tomb of twisted steel. It was one of the worst bridge disasters in American history. And the most bizarre part, after the collapse, the Mothman was never seen again. The day had started like any other in Point Pleasant. As evening approached, cars filled the Silver Bridge, a 39-year-old structure that spanned the Ohio River. Without warning, an ear-splitting screech of metal filled the air. Eyewitnesses described a sound like no other, as if the very sky was being torn apart. In a matter of seconds, the unthinkable happened. The bridge shuddered, then began to twist and buckle. Concrete crumbled, steel cables snapped like thread. Cars, still filled with passengers, slid towards the gaping maw that had opened in the bridge's center. Then, with a final groan of protest, the entire structure gave way. The icy waters of the Ohio River swallowed cars whole. Screams were cut short as vehicles plunged beneath the surface. Those lucky enough to be thrown clear found themselves fighting for survival in the freezing current, desperately clinging to floating debris. The aftermath was a scene of utter devastation. Twisted girders jutted from the water like the bones of some prehistoric beast. The river's surface was littered with floating wreckage, suitcases, car parts, and tragically, bodies. Rescue efforts were hampered by the frigid temperatures and treacherous currents. In the end, 46 lives were lost. Families were torn apart, and an entire community was left reeling. The Silver Bridge, once a source of pride, had become a monument to tragedy. And as the town struggled to make sense of the disaster, a chilling realization set in. The Mothman, that terrifying harbinger of doom, had vanished without a trace. So what was the Mothman? Skeptics claim it was a simple misidentification of a large bird. Others believe it was a case of mass hysteria. But there is a more terrifying and perhaps more tragic theory, that the Mothman was not a monster sent to cause the disaster, that it was a supernatural entity, an omen desperately trying to warn the people of the impending collapse, that its red eyes weren't a sign of malice, but of desperation. In the wake of the tragedy, theories began to circulate. Some clung to rational explanations, desperate to make sense of the inexplicable. They pointed to the sandhill crane, a large bird native to the region, with its distinctive red markings around the eyes. Others suggested a case of mistaken identity involving the great horned owl. known for its imposing size and piercing gaze. Psychologists proposed a different explanation: mass hysteria. They argued that the initial sighting had triggered a wave of fear and suggestion, causing people to see what they expected to see. The power of the human mind, they claimed, was more than capable of conjuring shared delusions, especially in a close-knit community gripped by fear. But for many, these explanations fell short. They couldn't account for the sheer scale of the sightings, the consistency of the descriptions, or the inexplicable phenomena that had accompanied the Mothman's appearances. This led to a more unsettling theory, one that cast the creature not as a harbinger of doom, but as a desperate messenger. What if the Mothman wasn't a monster at all? What if those burning red eyes weren't filled with malice, but with an urgent warning? Proponents of this theory suggest that the Mothman was a supernatural entity, perhaps even angelic in nature, trying desperately to alert the people of Point Pleasant to the impending disaster. In this light, the creature's actions take on a new meaning. Its persistent appearances, always seeming to draw attention to itself, could be seen as attempts to communicate. The electronic disturbances, the static on TVs and radios, might have been crude efforts to transmit a message that human technology could unquite decode. Even the men in black take on a different role in this interpretation. Rather than silencing witnesses, perhaps they were trying to gather information to piece together the warning before it was too late. Their otherworldly appearance and behavior could be explained by their own supernatural origins, aligned with the Mothman's mission. This theory paints a tragic picture of an entity bound by rules we can't comprehend, unable to directly intervene, watching in despair as the disaster it foresaw unfolded despite its best efforts. In this light, the Mothman's disappearance after the bridge collapse becomes not a sign of guilt, but of profound failure and grief. The mystery of the Mothman remains, a monster, a warning, or a figment of imagination. Whatever it was, for the people of Point Pleasant, it is forever a part of the darkest chapter of their history. A reminder that sometimes there are things more terrifying than monsters, ... And those are the disasters they foretell. What do you think? A demon sent to destroy, or a fallen angel desperately trying to warn us of our own fate?